Thanks, Cormac. So, I'm Martin, and basically my background is more the Java. So I've been working on couple large projects in Java, and then I moved to JavaScript. So basically for the last 2 years, I mainly use the JavaScript on the back end and on front end. So on the front end is the Angular. And today we're going to talk about the ES6 feature. As Cormac said a couple months ago, I had a presentation how to start writing your code in ES6. So if you want to know that, the slides are still available on my page. So let's start it. So first, I really want to just quick talking about the history of JavaScript. So if we're going to look, the JavaScript basically created by Brad and Ike in 1995, part of the Netscape project. Then was ES1 and ES2. They're not that important. Most important, ES3. And the reason for that is because much of the core language is used today. So the language that implement ES3 we are using today. And the reason why I actually want to talk about the history of JavaScript is because of the ES4. That's actually a funny fact. There's been a lot of work done on ES4. They actually try to implement the classes, modules, types, and many more features. But the group couldn't really agree, like what feature should be actually implemented in ES4. And basically they said the ES4 is too ambitious. So they decided to skip the ES4. And instead of that, we got the ES5, which coming with small feature like the getter, setter, JSON parsing, and the string mode. Then 6 years later, after ES5, we are getting ES6. So my understanding is that ES6 should be released this month. So there's already pre-release candidate number 4. And if you look on if you will see the ES6 feature, you actually can find that some features are coming from the ES4, like the classes and modules. From after the ES6, we're going to see the releases more often. So basically, we're not going to wait probably 6-7 years for another release. The next ES7 release coming basically next year or maybe in 2 years, and it's going to be really small release. So the release is going to come more often, and it's going to be really small releases. What actually the goal of ES6? So the main goal of ES6 is basically make the ES6 to be a better language for writing large application. My background was the Java, so when I came to the JavaScript, and if you try to write really large, complex application in JavaScript, it's not that simple. I still kind of find kind of awkward part in the JavaScript as a language. So that's basically what the ES6 tries to solve. It's really try to let you write really large, complex application in ES6. And even you can see most people actually moving, when they come into JavaScript, they're moving to CoffeeScript or to Dart to creating large, complex application in simple way. So that's try to be solved with ES6. It also try kind of push you writing libraries. So with ES6, if you try to create the libraries, it's much simple because they introduce ES6 module syntax. So basically, we're going to use the ES6 modules, and you actually can create the libraries much simple way. They also try out the code generation targeting for the new edition. So basically, that's saying that they try to make the language simple for generator like the Dart, CoffeeScript, or something else. If you would open the ES6 specification document, which has over 600 pages, you probably would find a lot of ES6 features. So discuss each of these features will be really hard, or probably would take over 2 hours. So I'm just going to choose the most exciting or most interested ES6 feature for me, and probably also for you. We start with the new feature called the block scope. So in JavaScript, you have basically 2 scopes currently. You have the function scope and you have the global scope, which you basically you are using the var keyword. For the block scope, that's the third scope that we will implemented in JavaScript. You can use the let and constant keyword. So if you're going to look what's the difference between the var and let in this example, you can see in the function I'm going to declare the var x, which basically belongs to the function scope. And later on I'm going to create the if statement, which basically, and inside of the if statement I'm going to declare 2 function let x, basically override the var x variable, and also I'm going to create the let epsilon. Basically, there are 2 variables that belongs to the if block. So if you try access, let's say the epsilon variable outside of the if statement, it's not going to work because it belongs to the block scope, the if block scope. And you can also actually, if you try use the let keyword or you try the let scope, you can actually use the hoisting, and I think so that's a really good thing. Because with var, you can actually declare your var on the bottom of your code, and you try assign on the top. And we as a developer, we try always read the code from top to bottom. So we try use the hoisting with let keyword, it's not going to work. So that's actually going to kind of push you writing better code. So you should always come declare your variables on the top or close to the block scope. If you're going to there's another advantage to the let, and that's for the the for loop. So if you look on the left-hand side example when we use the var keyword, so basically what we're doing here, we try looping through the, we're going through the loop and we try actually assign the value of the I variable to the array, so basically pushing the variable. And if you try access this array, let's say with index 3, what I would expect as a normal developer coming from Java would be, the result should be 3, but at the moment we are getting value 5. And the reason for that is because we are creating one variable that we actually assign to the, we are pushing to the array, so basically we are still using the same variable. And if you look on the right, we try the let keyword. The result, the output of the index 3 is correct, it's number 3. And the reason for that is when we are looping through, when going through the loop, we are creating the unique scope for each variable. So basically each time you push the unique scope to the array, so that's kind of the advantage, use the let. So my tip would be, I would always use the let instead of the var because it's much cleaner, it's much easier to understand for other developer if they're coming from different background. So basically the let should be kind of replacement for var, and var should be deprecated in the future. Constant. Currently in JavaScript it does have a constant. The most developer what they're doing, they try kind of create a variable with capital letters and just show the developer, look, that's the constant, that shouldn't change. But in JavaScript you still can change the value. Nothing stops you actually to change the value. So you can see on the example that's still valid. You still can assign the value 3 to variable A. With constants that's not possible anymore. So basically if you try assign the value after you create a constant, you will get the error. Another feature is calling default parameters. So with default parameters, if you look what we're trying to do here, we have a function. Sometimes we don't really want to pass any parameters. And in that case, we actually want to use the default value for that. So let's say if we want to call the function without the parameters, the output will be 42 because 11 plus 31 is 42. And also, you have to use the boolean inside of the function, which the code is a little bit variables. And the funny fact is, if you look on the last example, when you try to call the function with the null, the value null and 42, what I would expect will be the output should be 42 because null plus 42 is 42. But the problem in JavaScript, null is falsy. So when you're actually passing value null to your function, it's false. So the result is different what we expect. So JavaScript ES6 try introduce new feature calling the default parameters. One actually can add the default parameters on your function during declaration. And also it's going to fix the problem with the null, so because in that case null is just a number, it's not the falsy. If we're going to a more complex example is something like this. So we actually, it doesn't need to be just primitive, we can also use the expression like the callbacks or function. So in this example I have 3 arguments or 3 parameters. The first one is required. Another 2 timeout and callback, they are not because you set them as a default one. So when I call the make request only with 1 parameter, then I'm going to take the default value 2000 and the callback. If I try call a function with the 2 parameters, I'm just going to take default as a callback. If you're going to use all the 3 parameters, that means you're not going to use any default value. The rest parameters. This is actually very similar how this works in Java. So if you're going to look on the example, and if you look how I call the log my books with 2 arguments, book 1 and book 2, this is just a really simple example, but you need to imagine actually you can have 7 or 8 arguments that you want to pass. So what most people doing, they don't want to define this kind of argument in the function. They actually try to use the argument object. So basically every function has access to argument object. And then what you try to do, you actually try to slice that argument and get the array. So you can actually go through all these arguments and do some business logic. That's going to be simplified in ES6 because you can use the rest parameters. And basically, you don't use any slice function. It's more simplified. And also important, the rest parameter is array. So it's automatically you can do any loop or whatever you want. That's another example, basically. If you look, you're passing the three arguments, Martin, book 1, book 2, and you try and print them, you can see the first argument actually is string, but then you get in the array because the rest parameter is the array. So just be careful when you're doing that like this. The spread parameters, they are just inverse of the rest parameter, and they just try to replace the apply function. So if I look on the example, what I would suggest, just look on the mathematical max function. So what I'm trying to do here, you try to declare your array with some value, and basically what max function try to do is try to find the highest number in your array. But the problem is that the max function doesn't accept the array. So what you have to do, you have to use the apply function and then pass the array. That's actually we simplify with the spread operator, because you don't use any apply function. We're just passing that through to the function, and that's going to be automatically split. And also the spread operator let you actually concat the file. So if you look on the, for example, how nicely you can actually concat the numbers, and then also how nicely you can actually concat the string. So basically, if you look how the spread operator works, they're really just kind of iterator that's going through the array and try to merge them together. Destructing. So first we're going to discuss destructing object. In JavaScript, you can have cases when you want to create the object, and then actually you want to just take some properties or some methods from the object. So the way how we would it in old way is basically you want to try create the object, get a month and get a date and just print them. A new way that's more simple, because as a destructive saying, like you try destructing your object. So basically try the copy the value from that object and property. So if you try print them, you can print month and day. If you try use the MMD, it's not going to work because you get reference error. I personally think most of the time you can do something like this, which is more simple. They're going to match the value. So you can imagine, let's say you have 6 or 7 properties you want to just copy. If you try that with ES5, you have a lot of code. With ES6, that's much simple. So basically, what ES6 tried to do, it tried just to simplify the syntax of the language. The same, we have the destructive array. So you're doing the same thing, like you were doing object, you can do something with array. So in old way, you would do something like this. In the new way, it's much simple. You just declare the month and day, and they're automatically copied, which is easy. Object literal shortened. So what I'm doing when I will create my application, I use the closure. And in closure, you can define if you have a public properties or private. And also public and private method. And in the end, what I'm doing, I always try kind of expose what should be the public. So for example, in that case, you have name, and age. If you see this kind of will be variable because you just copy the code or the naming convention like name, and age. And in ES6, that's much simple because just passing the property name out. Or you can even mixing. So if you still want to change if you want to change like the name, you don't want to have a name, you still can use the old style. But once again, like imagine you have, I don't know, 10 properties that you want to expose. It's much easier. You don't need to duplicate your code. Same with the function. So when you're creating the object literal, basically you have to use the function keyword. And ES6, that's much simple. You don't need to use any keyword, just passing and store away. Template string. So the way how, when we try to declare the variable in JavaScript and then try to actually put a variable inside a string, you have to use the plus symbol. The ES6 coming with a better solution, and it's calling the template string basically uses the backtick, you are using the $sign and curly braces. And this not only works with primitives, but it also works with the expression and function. So you can see this is going to be really handy for the front-end developer when they're working with the HTML tags and try to use some logic there. The code is much easier to read. The template also support the multi-line. So in old way, what you would do, would you try is the join function, and also then the plus keyword. In the new way, it's much simple. You don't use any join, you don't use any plus, just the backtick symbol. But be also careful if you try to use the spaces because they are counting in your template literals. For loops. For loops try to be really just replacement for for-in and for-each function. So if you look how for-in works, again, for me as a Java developer, when I come and see something like that, what I would expect would be the result A, B, C, D, E. But what I'm getting is just the key of or index of the array. So they introduced the for-of loop, which actually print what you expect. And for-of loop also work with generators, the collection, the map, and many other things. So there's a lot of improvements to use the for-of instead of for-in. arrow function. So if you've been working with a CoffeeScript, probably that will be really familiar to you because that's the same thing how this works in a CoffeeScript. So basically what arrow function try to do, they just really dropping the function keyword, the return keyword, and also the bracket or the braces. So the old way how we would create the function in ES5 is something like this. In ES6, that's much easy. There's no function keyword, there's no return keyword, there's also no brackets. And there are different variation. The place where I find is that the arrow function is for anonymous function and for the callbacks. So that's only the place you actually want to try use the arrow function. And arrow function also try help you with lexical disbinding. So this is really cool. You know, when you're creating the object in JavaScript, basically the object are just really point or link or pointer to another object. So what you have to do to make sure that you have your correct pointer to the correct object, you have to use the bind in ES5. Arrow function tries to simplify that. You just use this and it's automatically out for you. So you don't use any binding function anymore. They also introduced the collection like map and set. So map are really just a key value pair. And currently, what most developers are doing when they try to create the map, so they try to use the object. So basically a property name, property value. That's how we're doing that in old JavaScript style. But the problem with that is you can only use the primitives. If you try to use, for example, the object, it doesn't work. So the way how we're going to do that in ES6, you're just going to create a new map, you're going to set the key with value, and you try to get the value by the key value. And also you can create the object. So basically you can assign, the key actually can be also the object. And then you're going to iterate through your map. So you can use the values, you can also use the string. If you look on the last example, you can see actually we are getting the two future, we're getting for off and destructive array together. So that's how we're going to simplify the looping. We also have a set, which basically is a collection of unique values. So if I look how we're going to create the set, it's like this. You can also create the object, that's working fine. And if you try assign the same object or same value, it's not going to be there because it's the duplication, so it's going to be ignored. And then how we're going to loop through the set. Promises. Okay, before we get to the promises, if you look for all this future, like the res, spread, object literal, they will just try simplify the ES6 language to be. You try use the less syntax, and it's going to be really easy to read. It's not going to be so confusing for other people. If you look on the promises, currently if you try to use the promise in your project, you have to use a library like the Q or the WHEN or the Bluebeard. And ES6 promises are really just standard from the promises and A+. So if you are familiar with this standard, promises in ES6 will be very simple for you. So the way how we're going to create the promise in ES6 is with the new promise keyword, and then you have just resolve and reject. So what I'm doing is this example, I have two functions, and both functions are going to return the promise. So the way how we're going to consume the promise in ES6 is the same way like how we know from the other libraries. So it's very simple. But the key point here is this is already implemented in the language. You don't need to use any libraries. The way how we're going to chasing the promises is the same, and you can even use the promise all that's already implemented in the language. Just one tip. If you're working on a really large application, I'm talking really large application, the native promises are still slow. They still didn't improve the performance in the engine, in JavaScript engine. So what I would suggest is still using the Bluebeard library, because I find the Bluebeard library as one of the fastest promise library, which is at the moment. But again, like if you're working on a large application, if you're not working on medium, that doesn't matter for you. Okay, generators. That's actually one of the very cool feature in ES6. So what the generator try to do, they really try pushing you writing the asynchronous code more synchronously. The code is still asynchronous, but as you see in the end of the example, if you start reading the code, it's really the code look really like synchronous. So first I want to discuss the syntax of the generators. So the generators are very similar like the function, but the key difference is the star character or star symbol that you're using in front of the function. And also the generator lets you pause and resume your state of, they let you actually pause and resume the application state. So that's why we're using the yield. So basically the yield let you pause the execution of the generator. And if you look how we're going to call the generator, if you look on this example, the most developer would see, they think there's the function, but actually does not read the function. Because what this is returning is really the iterator object. And the way I'm going to execute the generator is with the next. So basically, this is going to return the generator object, which has the next function. And if you're going to call next function, that's going to return the object, which has two values, the value and the done property. And if I show you the example, so this is the example. And if you look on that, so what I'm doing here, I want to print the execution start. I want to go through some step in the generator. And in the end, I want to print the execution complete. So if I'm going to call the generator, the first thing what you see, if there will be normal function, I just put the console output. What you would see at least the print some execution start, but nothing happened because this is returning the iterator object. So I have to actually step inside the generator. So when I go in that using the next function, the first thing what you're going to see is finally going to see the execution start, and actually going to see the object is written by next function and have two property value and done. Done basically is telling you if the iterator was completed. So in this case, not, because we are just only in the first state. So when you look on the yield, basically we're pausing in that generator. That's when we pause our task. So I go into next, which is going to print the value 2. I go in 3, and it's still pausing. It still doesn't print the execution complete. So I'm still not finished with iteration. So I go into last step, which basically print the execution complete, and done is true. So basically the iteration was completed. When I look in on the generator, and most example what you're going to find, it's try to explain how the iterators work. But I couldn't really understand how this is going to improve the way how we're going to write our language. For example, how it's going to see that we're going to write asynchronous language, but more synchronously. So I want to show you the real example. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to write this code in callback. That's we're going to rewrite it to promises, and in the end we're going to rewrite to generators. So what I'm doing here is I work in a restaurant, and I want to take some order. And order is really asynchronous task because I don't know how long it's going to take. So imagine the take order is the asynchronous task. Once I'm going to get all orders, I want to start cooking the food. So when I start cooking the food, I don't know how long it's going to take. So it's again asynchronous task. So when I start cooking the food and food is ready, there might be some error. They probably missing some food or whatever, and then we're just going to complete the order because of the error. So, but if the cook is ready, we start serving the cook for our customer. So I have another function calling eat. So what I'm trying to do here is I want to wait till my customer is going to finish their meal. So basically, I'm waiting for all 3 customers to finish their meal, and then what I'm doing, I try kind of calculate the price for the meal and just give them the total of the price. The way how we're doing that, you basically trace the variables to make sure to waiting when all customers are going to finish, and then basically just return the total number for our meal. So if you look on this code and it's written callback, it's not very nice. It's really hard to read for a developer. And you can imagine more extreme examples that are larger. So this is already hard to read. So let's refactor it to promises. So what I'm doing with promises, if you've been working, is quite simple. So you take the order, you return the promise, and you wait till the promise is resolved. When the promise is resolved, you start preparing the food. When the food is ready, you try serve the food to the customer, and they start eating. You can see with the promise also actually a little bit simplify our code from the callbacks. So what promise all is doing is basically just waiting till all customers are going to finish their meal. And once they finish their meal, and we also try waiting for the error. Once they're going to finish their meal, we're getting price for each of the meal, and we try calculate the total price. So basically then you return the price of the meal. So that's a little bit simple, like the callbacks, but it's still not nice. If you look on the code, we have a lot of then keyword, we have a lot of return keyword, we have a lot of brackets. It's still not nice. So let's have a look how this is going to look like in generators. It's actually going to be much simple. If you look on this, that's look very synchronously, because what we are doing here, we try to take an order, we're going to wait, we're going to get the order, we're going to jump into the next step, we try to prepare the food, then we're going again to the next step, we're waiting until all customers are going to finish their meal, we're going to get number, and then we're just going to return the promise. So even when you're reading that, it's much simple. But the one thing is, you have to keep in mind that generator actually return the, actually, we're going back also how we're going to catch the errors. So for example, when we're writing code synchronous way, what most people use in synchronous languages is the try and catch. The same thing you can do in generators. So it's look much simpler, it's much easier to read. But because we are the generator, so you need to keep in mind that if we try execute the generator function, what we're getting back is iterator. So what you would have to do, you would have to actually implement your own function and going through each step manually. So I don't want to create my own function. What I want to do, I try use the library. So I can use the blueprint, or even you can use the queue. So all both this library, they have the async function. So if you look what async function is doing, it's basically execute your code in synchronous way. It's still asynchronous code, but it basically is let you execute the code in synchronous way. And in the end, you return the promise with the total price. So this is the way how it's going to work in generators. If you look when we went from the callbacks to promises to generator, the code is much simple. It's much easier to read. But I'm still unhappy how the code look like. Why? First, I need to actually load the external library. That's not nice. Another thing, you have to wrap your generator with async function. That doesn't look good. And also you have to return the promise. So there's proposal for ES7. You can already use this proposal with Babel. So basically Babel is super async and await. So what I'm doing here, I don't need to call any external library. I just use the async keyword, which basically wrapper the generator. And it looks much simple. And also I'm going to replace the yield keyword with await. They're doing the same thing, but semantically await is make more sense. You're awaiting for the task to be complete. So if you look on the code now, you can see it's really clean. You have only a few lines of the code to compare to previous, for example, the callback or the promises. And the code is still asynchronous. It just executes in synchronous way. And also important fact is, if you look on the total, I'm not returning the promise. I'm returning the primitive. So it's very simple. That was the generator. So the classes. The classes are actually one of the most controversial feature in ES6. And I explain the reason why this is controversial in a few minutes. But first, let's have a look on the classes. So the classes are really just syntactic sugar on top of the prototypes. So the way how we're going to create a constructor in ES5 is just simple. And then use the prototype function. And then you're just going to create the object. With ES6, if you're coming from Java, that's the same thing. With syntax is the same, but fundamentally, the creating object in class in Java and creating object in JavaScript is two different. They're working differently, as you will see later on. So what you're doing here, we use the class keyword. You also have a constructor, and then you have a method, and in the end, you're just going to create the object. The way how inheritance work in old way in ES5, it's really ugly. So you have to use the so we have the class person and then we have a class employee. So when you try inherit the person to the employee, you have to call the person call. Then also you have the object that creates, and also if you want to try get a function from the person, you also have to use the call. This is really hard to read. So with ES6, that's actually much simple. Because you use the extend, it works the same like in Java. So you have extend keyword, and also you are using the super keyword. And if you try access let's say the function display name, which was declared in a person object, you also can use the super keyword. And then you're just going to create the object. So that's where you simplify your code. If you are if you want to rewrite the object-oriented style and try use the classes. Okay, why actually that's a really controversial feature in ES6? Because most people saying like we shouldn't really implement the classes to JavaScript. Before we try to understand, we have to understand one thing: the way how inheritance work in class-oriented languages and how inheritance work in prototype inheritance. So if you look on the screen, on the left you have the class, and on the right you have the prototype. So I would explain it on the example of the human. So when your parents had you I know it's funny. So when your parents had you inherited their DNA. So basically just took their copy of the DNA. That's the way how this works in the classes, for example, in Java. So when they broke their leg, yours didn't break because you take a copy of the DNA. But if you look how they actually work in JavaScript world, so we try inherit DNA from the parents, and when they break their leg, your breaks too. Because what we're doing in JavaScript, it just really link to the object. We're just basically pointing. So that's why many people saying like you try bringing actually the classes that are popular in Java, but fundamentally there are two different things. So when you're saying like you are using the new keyword, you are assuming you're creating a new object, but basically what you're creating is just linked to the another object. That's really different. So it's really up to you which way you want to go. If you want to use the classes or if you don't want to use the class. If you don't want to use the classes, you have bunch of approaches, but I'm going to mention a few. So the first one is really Kyle Simpson object linked to other object. In the end of the slides, I don't want to put the code because I would probably run out of time. There's the example for the code. The other option is used the factories by Eric Elliott. And the third one, what I found was Douglas Crawford way. And he actually showed this example on Node.js a couple months ago. And when I saw the example first time, I couldn't really understand because I didn't understand ES6 feature. I didn't understand the object destructing. I didn't understand the object literal. So if we look what he actually tried to do, we try to create the object. We use the person. So we're passing the object literal with two properties: the first name and the last name. So they're actually passing to the person object, person function, and then you decide what actually you want to copy. This is the destructive object. You can decide what you want to copy. So in this case, I want to copy first name and last name. So these are really private members. So currently, when you try to use the ES6 classes in JavaScript, you don't have options with the private properties. There's the workaround, like you can use the wig map, or you can use you can define your variable with let keyword inside of the constructor, which look really weird in ES6 when you use the classes. So basically, these are all the private member of my object. And then basically what he's doing, he tries the object freeze. But first, when you look on that, you can see we also use the object literal, which is much simple. You just decide what you want to make it public. So it's really up to you what you want to, if you want to just pass the property or also function. And he tries the object freeze. I still find object freeze like too extreme, so you probably don't really need to use. But the reason why actually he wants to use object freeze is because in JavaScript, the only way how we can guarantee immutable data is with object freeze. So basically, he freezes the object and passing. The way how inheritance work in his example is, again, you try create the employee, and you want to pass object literal with first name, last name, and employee ID. So when you pass it to employee, you can decide actually want to take from what property you want to take to employee. In this case, I want to take employee ID. So you have a lot of options. The way how inheritance work, and this is really cool, you're actually passing the spec object literal to the person. So in person actually can copy the first name and last name, and I actually can decide what I actually want to take from that object. For example, in that case, in a person, I'm exporting the first name and display name. But in employee, I want to take only display name. When you try to use the inheritance in the classes, and you try what you have to do, like in classes, you inherited everything. Like in this way, you actually have an option. You can say what you want to inherit. It's really up to you. And also, there's another advantage. Use the multiply inheritance, or if you can call it differently, composition. That you have multiply project, and you try to take what you want or what you need from that object. So this is quite cool. And then basically also can declare the private members, and then again you can decide what you want to export. If you look on that code, it's so clean. You don't have new keyword, you don't have super keyword, you don't have class keyword, you don't have this keyword. I know maybe that could be a question regarding to performance, but probably that's a different topic and we can discuss that during the break, because there are some penalties. But the code, okay, so the code is really clean. So these are resources. If you don't really want to use the classes, there's a lot of bunch of resources that are saying why you should not use the classes and the way how we can do that. The last thing, modules. That's actually exciting feature in ES6, and the reason for that is currently there's so many formats. You have the AMD that's used by require.js on the front end. We have the CommonJS that's really popular in Node.js community. And also we have UMD, and try get running AMD with the CommonJS is not very simple. That's the reason why you have to use the processor file or something, because they're really conflicting. So what ES6 modules try to do, they try to be replacement for both of them, like for AMD and CommonJS. That's mean like if I'm gonna write my code or my library on the backend, it's guaranteed it's also gonna work on the front end. If I'm gonna write it on the front end, it's also gonna work on the backend. That's really powerful. And they also try to take the base from the CommonJS AMD. So if you're gonna look at the spec, so basically spec define the module syntax and module loader. So if you're gonna have a look how the module syntax work, you have two options. You can use the name it export, when you have basically multiply export per file, or you have the default export when you have the one export per file. In this case, I'm going to show you the multiply export. So basically what I'm doing, I just exporting the constant, I'm exporting the function. It's very similar how the CommonJS work. And then you can decide what you want to import. So in this case, I want to import the square and diag. Or in different way, you can export everything and you have basically namespace by lib. Now, this is the default. So you can, when you try the default export, you can only default one thing per module. And the way how we're going to import it's without brackets. So you're not using the bracket. So you immediately know that's the default export. That's important to the only one. And somehow it's working in classes. The model loader, I don't know actually where you're going to use the model loader on the back end. I'm using that on the front end. So what basically the model loader try to do, So what model loader try to do, it let you conditionally load your modules. So for example, on the front end, sometimes you want to load your code, and after you load your code, you want to load your templates. And because it's written in the promise. So I only using it on the front end. I never really used it on the back end. So these are the features that we didn't really cover. So it's up to you to just cover this feature, and I'm just going to go real quick. The way how we're going to write ES6 today is, so we know it's probably take some time when the ES6 will be implemented in the browser. But I can tell you, when the ES6 will be implemented in your browser, you're going to already write your code in ES7 or ES8. So, and the way how we're going to do that is the transpiler. If you look on the compatible table, you can see that, for example, the Babel has 80% coverage. The new IE browser calling Spartan has 70% coverage. The Google Chrome has 65, same with Firefox. And then IOGS has over 50% coverage. This is really high, so I don't say we're going to wait a few years. But the way how we're going to develop the code in the future will be through transpiler. Now regarding to quick to, this is kind of my personal opinion. So if you look on the compilers and transpilers, so first thing, what is different between compiler and transpiler? The compiler basically compile one language to another one, like the Dart to JavaScript, Java to JavaScript, and so on. Transpile, it's transpile the same code, for example, ES6 to ES5. I never really was a really big fan of the CoffeeScript, and if you look how many features been implemented in ES6, I don't see that the CoffeeScript is really future, but that's my personal opinion. If you want to use it, that's fine with you. So I wouldn't use that. Regarding to Dart, that's opinion. So regarding to Dart, Dart was really created for complex application, and that's what actually ES6 tries to solve. But the Google announced a couple months ago they are not planning to ship the Dart to Google Chrome. So basically saying, okay, that's probably not the future. And if you look, when the Angular started working on Angular 2, they didn't choose the Dart, they chose ES6. So basically it's saying, okay, that's probably not the future. It's probably go better with the standard language. So I wouldn't use it either. I would still go with ES6. Regarding to TypeScript, TypeScript is really just a subset of the JavaScript. So again, like most of the features are already implemented in the JavaScript. But there are a few like the types that I find when you work on a large project might be a really good idea. So I would still use that. And actually there's proposal for ES7 to use the types in a JavaScript. So 1 year, maybe 2 years from now, we won't really need any TypeScript. And I think the way is more going with Babel. So basically the Babel will let you compile your ES6 code to ES5, and basically you are using the standard. And probably it's always it's better bet on the JS, because a lot of people try to replace the JavaScript, it never happened. We have still, and you can see actually a lot of people coming and joining the JavaScript community. So basically the JavaScript community is just growing. But that's my personal opinion. If you want to, just use them. Regarding to books, if you want to look on the ES6, you can find the ES6 Beyond Understanding ECMAScript 6 and Exploring ES6. That's probably the books that I find very interested. Here's the resources and ES7 Future. So regarding to ES7 Future, there will be only a small subset. So basically, you already share with async and await. Probably going to add tab annotation. Object observed is already implemented in the browser. And they're going to add more function to array and generators. But that will be a small release. It won't be big like the ES6. And this is still kind of proposal, so it can change in the future. And that's it. So.
Questions?
Hi there, thanks for that. There's another transpiler called Tracer, which is Google's own. How does that compare to Babel in particular, and do you have a preference?
I prefer the Babel, because the clean that you compile from ES6 to ES5 is much cleaner. And even if you see more community actually moving to Babel, so it's better. So I prefer the Babel. Before I was actually using the Tracer, because the Tracer was on the first compiler. And then the Babel actually called 6 to 5, but now it's calling Babel. So my personal preference is the Babel, and the main difference is the output of the code. And currently even the Babel has the higher coverage than Tracer. Tracer around 60%, I think so. So that's the main difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sergey, and you mentioned about the performance of promises from the ES6, not so good. And what about performance of generators?
That's the same thing because they are kind of built on top of the kind of promises. So, but again, if you work on a really large project, I'm talking massive project. Don't think like when you have a medium or small project, it won't really affect you. But there's still, but I believe they in the future they try kind of optimize the JavaScript engine that's going to have a better performance. So yes, there is kind of performance impact that you have to keep in mind. But I don't have any numbers. I wouldn't kind of just tell you how slow it is compared to the callbacks. But there is some performance penalties. But again, keep in mind like what kind of application you want to develop, and then you're going to decide. But you can see like this advantage because the code is synchronous. So it's really dependent on application they try.
And how debug it in usual way?
Didn't try probably. Yes, I didn't try debugging the generator yet. So, but because they are compiled to, so basically they are compiled to ES5. So there will be probably a lot of code, but it will be very hard to read. So that's the way how we're going to debugging that. Because in the end, it's still ES5 that you're going to use in your browser.
You talked a lot about introducing new features. What about deprecation of old features?
They can't. The reason for that is you can't make break-in changes in JavaScript. That's the agreement. So ES6 needs to be compatible with ES5. There are no break-in changes. That's actually make other new feature very hard because you can't break the language. If you will break, basically you break every browser. So there's the agreement that whatever new feature will come need to be compatible with previous one. So ES6 will be with ES5 and ES5 with ES3. So they can't make break-in changes in JavaScript. That's why actually they add the new feature.
And that's going to go forever?
Yes.
As in
well, like, I don't know what will be 10 years.
Support.
I don't know what will be 10 years from now, but probably that's the way how we're going to go till we're going to use this browser. So that's the standard. So they only can add the. But I think so. For example, I saw the Google. They're using something like you have the user strict in JavaScript. They calling that using strong. So basically, when you're going to your code, it's tell you let's say you trace a var. It's going to point to you that's deprecated. But it's still valid code. So basically, when you try execute the code in a browser, and you try use a strong mode, which is not at the moment nowhere. Like there's just the plan probably added to ECMAScript. But basically, when you try execute your code in a browser, it tells you that var is deprecated, for example. But they can't make any break-in changes in JavaScript for obvious reason. It's not like, for example, when you work in Node. Like in Node, they could because you have the VM that's running on the Node. That's much simpler, like in a browser. So there won't be any break-in changes in the future.
You talked about decorator for ES7 and to use that to specify the types that you can make. I did something quite similar with current JavaScript using JSDoc to specify the type.
We're talking about the types. What kind of types?
The type of parameters, for example, the type of your property. You can say belong to this class, this class, this class. All the stuff are already inside JSDoc. So I was wondering which one is the best. Now that's probably not a good question, but how could you compare the ES7 annotation for type compared to the JSDoc one?
But these annotations that coming in ES7 are more kind of metadata, and JS documentation, they're just the documentation. So that's a little bit different. So if you look, for example, how Angular team is doing, when you look on how they develop Angular 2, you actually have decorators. So something similar that we work in a Java.
Yeah, but not using JavaScript anymore. They're using TypeScript for memory.
And you're saying like the question how they compare to JSDoc?
Yeah, my question was, is that possible to do the same with JSDoc that what you can do with ES7 annotation? Because if you do that with our annotation, you can do actual check later. That would be more useful than just documentation. That's my point.
Yeah, I never really been working with the annotation in TypeScript, and I don't know what is proposal for ES7, so you would have to look what actually try to propose in ES7, and then you will see. But again, this is a proposal. Doesn't mean like it's going to be implemented in the language. So you have to wait till that will be implemented.
Okay, thanks.